Welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few, US Pie's weekly podcast that empowers parents to reclaim their children's education from government bureaucrats and social engineers. In each episode, Sherry delivers the latest news from the front lines of the fight for the minds of the next generation, equipping you with the tools and resources needed to join the cause.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and today we're tackling a story out of my state of South Carolina that exposes the hidden ideological agendas at work in our schools. Joining me is teacher and education advocate Adam Mahdavi, who was bravely spoken out about his experience with critical race theory at the university level and later a whistleblower in K-12 education. Before we dive in, take a moment to give us a 5-star rating, share the episode with a friend, and don't forget to visit uspie.org to join the movement.
Today's episode is brought to you by U.S. parents involved in education. US Pie's mission is to empower parents and local communities to break free from federal and national influences, thereby reclaiming parental authority over their children's education. For more insights from US parents involved in education, connect with us at US Pie on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm Sherry Few. My guest today is Adam Mahdavi, a teacher at the South Carolina Preparatory Academy. Adam earned his degree from the University of South Carolina School of Education, but not without controversy. After calling out ideological bias in the curriculum and exposing CRT-inspired content in K-12 schools, Adam faced threats from the university and courageously stood his ground and is now teaching in a classroom. Adam Mahdavi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to reconnect with you. I remember when we first met, you were still a student at the USC College of Education, and we're creating quite a stir over there, and there were certain things you could say and not say. And so I guess now you're telling all, and I'm just really thrilled that you've agreed to come on the podcast to share, because it's so important for people to understand that the teachers are coming out of the colleges of education fully indoctrinated and believing that what they're teaching is right. So let's get into that, and let's start with your time at the University of South Carolina. So can you describe your experience there and how you saw political and ideological bias impact the classroom?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. I went to Bible college in 2011. It took me several years to get my Bible certificate. I graduated from 2 Bible colleges in the same semester in 2017. 2 years later, I go to the University of South Carolina to return to finish my degree, something that I started in 2006 and left in 2010. So I returned 10 years later to find the political and ideological social climate thick, so thick that you could literally separate it with my pinky. When I walked into the library, the Thomas Cooper Library, in front of that big, beautiful fountain off of Green Street, it had posters plastered all over the outside walls and the inside walls on the elevator of Jim Crow pictures from the Jim Crow era of blacks holding up signs saying that they wanted to be able to vote in South Carolina. And the idea was that blacks were not able to vote. One of the main talking points at that time in 2019 was that Republicans were, how do you say, making it harder for blacks to vote, enforcing voter IDs, and the lady who we will talk about later even made the argument that in Georgia, in her state, the voting stations were further apart from where they used to be, making it harder for blacks to vote. And so that was the theme that I walked into the University of South Carolina in 2019. This is the exact time where the New York Times started releasing articles from the 1619 Project, and this is where the Trayvon Martin, the Freddie Brown or Freddie Gray martyr advocates started, getting a lot of leeway in the media. And critical race theory was just a whisper, I thought. It wasn't as big as it would we be in the next several months during COVID. So I enter the 2019 semester in the fall, and the ideological diversity, it was skim to none. It was non-existent. A lot of the presuppositions that critical theory and critical race theory hold, they were presumed to be true. Things like microaggressions, um, white privilege, endemic racism, things like that, and the story of Black Lives Matter was just getting steam. And little did I know, 8 months later, it would become a full out movement. So I would go to my history classes, I would go to my education courses, and I would just be inundated, just slapped in the face with the fact that America was systematically racist, that Christians were the enemy of our nation, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, because just a few years ago we had a president get in front of the Declaration of Independence Hall, um, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, Independence Hall, and literally called anyone who voted for Donald Trump or who was MAGA enemies of our democracy. And at that point in 2019, that hadn't taken place yet, but at the university level, in the history classes and in the education hallways of teacher preparation programs, it was certainly the vibe that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, which is the acronym for WASP, were a nuisance to our history and should be silenced and should stay silent. And it was in one of my education courses, and I don't want to name her. Um, I don't want to get her in a pool of trouble. Um, but she said that white Christian heterosexual males were, in fact, the problem in our country. This was the College of Education, University of South Carolina, and that all the female students should grow comfortable challenging white Christian heterosexual males. In my other classes, my other history classes, I was inundated with, and I was just slapped in the face with talking points from socialists, communists, talking points degrading not just Christianity but the American story, and it was everywhere. And I really didn't know what to do from that point. I was begging God to just really help me, because I had bitten off more than I could chew. You got to think that these students, sometimes they're 18, 19 years old. They're just learning these ideas for the first time, and you're being confronted with a very aggressive marketer or advertiser who has spent decades sharpening their arguments, who have had access to academic reservoirs of peer research journals, sharpening their arguments for years and years and years. And here I am just learning these concepts just weeks before I'm really having to, speak in class and write papers and write assignments. And I don't. It's you're very hard pressed to um, look at other sources from all the other sources that you have to, read and write on and study. And um, it was a challenge, but the Lord gave me strength, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that later. But yeah, it was in your face.
Well, I'm quite familiar with the College of Education at USC because I had some interactions with one of the professors there who came to Kershaw County to train our teachers. And I don't know if you remember this story, um, but I challenged our superintendent at a public meeting where he said, "We are not teaching critical race theory." But he went on to say, "We are training our teachers in culturally responsive pedagogy." And of course, because I had done the research, I knew that it was the same thing. In fact, it's broader than critical race theory. It incorporates several Marxist theories. And so I challenged him, and he said, I said, "Let me see the training materials." And so this professor from the College of Education at USC had trained our teachers in this. And I said, "I'd like to see the training materials." And he agreed to do that in public. No problem, send me an email. So I emailed him, I asked for the materials, and I'm told I had to FOIA them. So I always tell people, if you're told you have to FOIA something, there's something to hide. Well, Adam, I was foolish enough to think that I could win in court against them for violating the FOIA Act, the Freedom of Information Act. And I did sue them, and lost personal finances when I lost the case. But that's just a tidbit of an example, because you probably know the professor I'm talking about, and I don't mind saying her name because I have her book and I have publicly spoken out about her, and some of the quotes that she's made and some of the papers that she's written. It is so obvious that she's a racist, just plain and simple. And so I didn't mean to take over the conversation, but I just wanted to add that reference point for you and for our viewers of my experience with the University of South Carolina College of Education. And it's so important too for people watching all over the nation, because and especially in South Carolina, because they think, well, we're a conservative red state. That doesn't happen here. That happens in Washington or Rhode Island or California, but not in South Carolina. So I want you to tell us more about exactly how that is happening here. But first, let's talk about whether or not you felt isolated or pressured for expressing your Christian beliefs or conservative views while you were there.
Just to hit on the point you made, you're absolutely right in that culturally responsive teaching is a broader aspect than just critical race theory. The pioneer of that pedagogy is Gloria Ladson Billings. I will name her because she is such a strong figurehead from the University of Madison, Wisconsin, which is the sprout and the spring of critical race theory, and which that same institution is the alma mater of the current University of South Carolina president. Gloria Ladson Billings is the pioneer of what is termed culturally responsive teaching, also known as culturally relevant pedagogy. She was influenced by neo-Marxist Gramsci, who convinced people like Kimberly Crenshaw that you can get in a institution by using the logic of that institution and then thwarting that institution by causing confusion, ideological and social confusion, and ultimately switching the power structures, going from the oppressed or the powerless to the powerful. And that was Gramsci. She also utilized Foucault, who said that power should be guarded, and that power produces knowledge, and that knowledge is just created, and it is not objective and transcendent into the eternal absolutes. And that is true for some things, like a price tag at a retail store, that comes and goes. But things like, what is courage, what is justice, what is faith, what is love, what is friendship, what is choice, what is deliberation, what is good judgment, though there are standards that are eternal for those aspects, and Foucault just bypassed them. She also adopted Freire, um, and he was one of the people that said that students and teachers need to learn from each other, and that teachers need to advocate their power. They need to abdicate their power to the students, and that students can co-teach each other, and that you don't really learn from the expert, the mature, virtuous person who is the teacher. You learn from other students. And all of this becomes the amalgamation of what is known as culturally relevant pedagogy. And that really started in 1988, where Gloria Ladson Billings did a study of 8 teachers in Northern California for 3 years of elementary school teachers. And then in 1992, she got on the critical race theory train. And critical race theory then gave her the articulation, gave her the vocabulary, and the intellectual energy and the activist fervor to really set off critical race theory in education, which she did. She co-authored a paper called Toward Critical Race Theory of Education in 1995 that she co-wrote with the current LSU president, William Tate IV, who was, at the time that I was at the University of South Carolina, the provost. Yes, the main critical race theorist responsible for getting critical race theory in education was the provost of the University of South Carolina. And guess who hired him? Bob Caslen, the supposed champion of the right, when he became president in 2019. It was absolutely bonkers. So yes, culturally relevant pedagogy is a very broad um, thing to know, but people need to know about it, and they need to know that it is a neo-Marxist mechanism to really get the students confused, and it gets the students comfortable with challenging not just mainstream ideas of what is truth or moral relativism, but it also encompasses, the trans ideology. It also encompasses the critical race theory, where white students are made to feel lesser than. They can the students of color are given an upper hand, and I'm not saying that all black students that are under culturally relevant pedagogy act and behave in a way that makes all white students and all culturally relevant teaching classrooms feel like they're oppressed or they're ignored, but that is the purpose and intent of culturally relevant pedagogy. Um, and there's just so much more undergirding culturally relevant pedagogy. It's built off of Black feminism from Patricia Hill Collins, who says that Black women have a higher authority in the classrooms to speak about race if you're Black than if you're talking about race, because you're historically oppressed person. Then you can have leverage. What you bring with your skin color a type of social competence to talk about race, where white people who are the mainstream or the middle class whites do not have that competence. What does that do to a student who's white? What does that do to their sense of self-worth? What does it do to their own way of trusting how they think, their own ways that they come to judgment? The way that they use judgment, the way that they come to decisions. What does that do to the students long term in terms of being comfortable voicing out their opinion because of their skin color? They're told that they have white privilege and that they need to reckon with that white privilege. And to not reckon with that white privilege is to be a part of the very system that oppresses and holds down people of color and other minorities. And if you do not bow down, and if you do not say what your teacher says in elementary or middle and high school and colleges and college of education departments all over the country, then you are part of the problem. And that's exactly how how I mean, that's not even me. That's not even me. That's not Fox News. That's not Christopher Rufo. That's not Mark Levin. That's not Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk. That is critical race theorist. That's what Gloria Ladson Billings writes. That's what um, all the culture relevant pedagogy teachers. That's what they advocate from. Now, my personal opinion: if you're going to learn anything about culture relevant pedagogy, you need to go to the source. And Lori Ladson Billings is the source. And so she's written some articles in the 90s and in the early 2000s that I really encourage your viewers to go and read. She wrote a thing called Reading Between the Lines. She wrote an essay called Your Blues Ain't Mine. She wrote, but that's just good teaching the case for culture relevant pedagogy. I really encourage your viewers to go and read those articles if you want to get an understanding of culturally relevant pedagogy and to see how asinine it really is. And it really puts pressure on Christians. Your Christian faith is on trial. And I wouldn't say that every professor at the College of Education did this to me. Not everyone did it, but a lot did. Especially and I don't want to be too broad here, but it happened more often than not. Not every professor did it, but it did happen quite a lot that my Christianity was challenged and Christianity in general were challenged. Did it happen every day? Did we have good conversations sometimes? Yes, but the ultimate the ultimate question here is: are students at the University of South Carolina College of Education or College of Charleston, Winthrop, Wofford, Citadel, Clemson, Coastal Carolina, they're teaching colleges. They're colleges of education that are putting out teachers. Are they using the culturally relevant teaching model? Now, they changed the name, actually. They've changed it to culturally sustaining pedagogy. So they keep changing the language, they keep changing what it's called, but ultimately, that is what it is. But how does it challenge your Christianity? Well, they do it through history. They do it through revisionist history. I was told in multiple history classes, not just the Department of Education, that Christians were the source of colonial oppression all over Asia and Africa, where the Christian missionaries earned the trust of the Asians and the Africans. And once they earned the trust, then the Christians went and got the U.S. Marines, and the Marines helped take over the resources and exploited the people. And it was in your face. It was like that all the time. And anything that related to God, anything that related to the Bible, anything that related to the Christians of the past, American history or world history, in some way it was tainted.
And you talked about your Christian faith. That's one of the groups that they say are oppressors. So they've got, in the book I read, that was by this teacher from the USC College of Education, they had a chart in there that had one side was the oppressed and the other side was the oppressors. So in the oppressors category, of course, it was white, male, heterosexual. So that's where the LGBTQ comes in. And even
Yeah, didn't you know that you were talking to a triple privileged person right now? I'm a white Christian heterosexual male. Do you feel oppressed? Do you feel the oppression? My oppression, the rainbow of Mahdavi oppression is upon you.
yes, yes. So the final category was Protestant. So even Christians are oppressors, which is what you were saying. And I think the oppressed they called minority religions. So yeah, it's absurd. And I think the Marxist agenda is to intentionally pit people groups against one another in order to create chaos and collapse. And that's, of course, what we're seeing in our country today. And that's why we have to
And
put a stop to this
that's a good point.
indoctrination.
That's a good point. We talk about faith. It was the Bible that gave me courage. It was the Bible that allowed me to remove fear, because perfect love casteth out fear. So the Bible gave me courage, but scholarship gave me credibility. It gave me the intellectual energy to speak and speak well. And if you're a person in college and you're struggling, you need to build your vocabulary. You also need to get on Hillsdale College online courses that are free and get busy with the Aristotle course, the Constitution 101 course, the Introduction to the Constitution course. I actually got in I surrounded myself with like-minded believers, even though I was almost 15 years older than everybody because I was a non-traditional married student living off campus. I surrounded myself with, other like-minded individuals, and I would take what I was learning from Hillsdale and my extra research, and I would talk about it with them, and they would just absorb it. So much so that, Miss Sherry, that in the summer of 2021, I had 6 students from the Honors Capstone College program at the University of South Carolina, their honors college, from their political science department. 6 students met with me for 10 weeks during the summer to talk on the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, and we spoke for 2 hours every Monday because I utilized my time at the University of South Carolina wisely. I cataloged everything. I kept syllabi, and I eventually used all my syllabi and I turned it into Fox News 2 summers ago to expose what some of the assignments that I was taking down. And what the result of me working with Fox News a couple of years ago was that the University of South Carolina, the College of Education, had to take down their anti-racist definition from their College of Education website. So because I kept syllabi, I cataloged things that I was learning from my professors, assignments. I would keep assignments. Um, and because I actually took the extra steps to grow in my knowledge and build scholarly information, I had credibility, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom after I graduated. And anyone could do it. Anyone could do that.
You were and are very knowledgeable. And I remember when we interacted, I think I was running for state superintendent of education at the time, and I had offered you a job in my administration should I become elected because I needed someone who was knowledgeable of what's going on in the colleges of education. But it's been such a pleasure to watch you bloom and grow. And so let's talk a little more about your next experience, which was whistleblower. So, and some of the things you saw in the K-12 classrooms. So, what prompted you to take that risk and speak out, and what was that like?
So there were 2 versions. There was 2 steps to this. In my last year at the University of South Carolina College of Education, the teacher preparation program, I was getting my education in history education, in social studies, and in science. I like empirical thinking. I like reasoning um, based on evidence. I like taking abstract knowledge and holding it up to what we know to be true, to weigh our ideas and our creative, fanciful imaginations with things that we actually know that happened and that we can actually observe. And because visions, or like the social justice vision, it usually foregoes evidence. It usually foregoes any type of hypothesis testing to its visions. It just gets to make a lot of economic statements in terms of racism and systemic racism and white privilege, and really use race as a stigma for anybody who disagrees with them, to really take away their moral authority to give their opinion and to speak on facts and to speak on empirical data. And so that's why I chose science and history. And we need more of and we need more of cross we need to do more of that. We need to cross-examine the visions with facts and empirical evidence, and we need to teach our students how to do just that. That is teaching our students how to think. That is teaching critical thinking. But right now, we're teaching critical theory, like you said. Um, so the whistleblower experience happened in two segments. In my last year, I was going around Chapin, Lexington, Irmo parent groups, letting them know about my assignments, letting them know what was being taught, letting them know how the teachers in Lexington District 1, Lexington 2, Lexington 5, some Richland school districts, how middle school teachers were being trained to teach. And I would go and speak at those events. After graduation, the morning that I graduated, I made a website, and on that website, I had assignments that the University of South Carolina was very unhappy about me posting online, and they discovered this through the coaching teacher that had trained me that year from Creighton Middle School. And they called me in to a Soviet style meeting. They told me that they just wanted to talk to me about my internship. Well, when I go into the meeting, there's four people. There's two of them that I recognize. They were my uh, professors that I had just spent the past 3 years with, and then two people who I'd really never met before and I didn't know. One of them was Tommy Hodges, who is very active in the Department of Education and is, I think, is the active dean of the University of South Carolina College of Education. And the conversation that we had, which I did record, by the way, um, it was not very pleasant. It was not. It was not something uh, that I would like to repeat. They accused me of violating the handbook um, while I was a student, yet I had already graduated and completed the program. And so everything that I did that they were accusing me of, um, I had the freedom to do. I could post, they were mad about the website, is what they were mad about. And so they were trying to say that I made the website while I was a student, but I had Google stamp images of when I actually posted the website, and it was after I completed their program, so they really couldn't get me with that. So they tried to attack my state certification, and they did attack my state certification, but the Lord gave me confidence. The Lord gave me boldness. The Lord gave me a sense of humility, which really allowed me to be bold on steroids, and I won. I got my state certification. Then the second step of my whistleblower experience was when I was in a conversation with a lady who was talking to me about critical race theory. We were talking in a hotel, and it was a random conversation. And she was very impressed that I knew who Gloria Ladson Billing was, Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, Richard Delgado, Matsuda, Foucault, Marcuse, Paulo Freire. She was very impressed with some white boy's knowledge about critical theory and critical race theory in Ruby Red, Lexington County. And so she asked me a question. And when she asked me that question, I knew I had to have more conversations with her on record. And when I when I heard her ask that question, I knew that I had to get this on record. And the question was this. She asked me, So how are you applying critical theory to your classroom? When she said that, I knew that she would open up to me. I knew that the walls were down, and she was gonna talk. And she did. And so I recorded the conversation the next day. We had a conversation. I brought evidence. I brought articles from Gloria Ladson Billings. I brought articles from Delgado. And of course, this video is on the internet. But if you watch it, you're going to watch me also eat some very delicious wings. And those were the best wings I've ever had in my life. I tell you what. And it was a good distractor. People were like, why did you record yourself eating chicken? I can hear you swallowing and chewing. And I'll say this, I said, "You know what? Life's like, eating chicken wings. Sometimes you gotta eat the meat and spit out the bones. You don't get everything you like." So, I recorded that conversation, and in that conversation, she just made some wild, wild comments. The arrogance at that time in 2022 for the critical race theorists, for these, critical theorists, and for her and everything that she stood for, that was their high point in the Biden administration. That was where they had the whole country thinking that critical race theory was only in graduate law studies
Right.
and that it was nowhere in K through 12 education. And so the things that she said, and here's the thing, the whole reason why I did this was because I wanted the truth to get out. The truth is so good that it needs to be heard by everybody. The truth is so good that people need to know it, and they needed to hear it from not me. They needed to hear it from the people that were actually putting those ideas in the K through 12 schools. And with that and my knowledge of culturally relevant pedagogy and my time at USC studying culturally relevant pedagogy and applying it in my internship, I'm basically a trained neo-Marxist. Really, did you know that you didn't know that you were talking to a trifold white privileged male and also a cultural Marxist. But yeah, I knew that if I could use this recording um, to shed light on the truth, and I didn't want to do this for political reasons. I didn't want to do this to bring any attention to myself. I didn't get any money out of this. I didn't get any fame out of this. I never went on Charlie Kirk's show. I never talked to Ben Shapiro, and that's absolutely fine. I just wanted the parents at Lexington to know the truth. I wanted clarity and I wanted transparency, and this was just one of the ways to get it.
So, of course, I'm familiar with the Lexington School District. I guess it's Lexington 1, and that's supposed to be one of the best school districts in the state, and all parents want their kids to go there. So, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to look at a video, part of that video that you recorded. But before we do that, now tell us again who she was. She was a trainer for the Lexington School District, trained teachers. Is that correct?
So it was her name was Turika Sullivan. Her name is on the video that the Freedom Caucus posted, so it's public knowledge. And Miss Sullivan was a education specialist for a company that disseminated critical race theory ideas in an English program uh, that was all over Lexington 1 schools, all over Charleston schools, and even a charter school district in Greenville. So EL education stands for Expeditionary Learning. It's a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it was permeating South Carolina. And it was offering not only curriculum, but also it was also providing training for principals, for coaching teachers, for teachers, and it was also giving them talking points, political um, scripts, and it was doing a number on Lexington District 1, and that's what I exposed.
Okay, great. So we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll look at that video. So don't go away. I'll be right back with my interview with Adam Mahdavi right after this. It was once assumed that parents raise their children, but not according to President Joe Biden. In 2021, the Biden administration condemned parents' activism at school meetings as akin to terrorism and hate crimes. Parents voicing concerns about masks, explicit books, or boys using girls' locker rooms faced censorship, banning, and even arrest. Children starting as young as pre-K are increasingly taught they can identify with a gender opposite their biological sex, and the youth transgender illusion has reached epidemic levels, with states even taking children away from parents who stand for truth. U.S. Parents Involved in Education urges all parents to take decisive action. You can no longer sit on the sidelines wishing that government schools were like they used to be. Tune in next week for more insights from U.S. Parents Involved in Education, and connect with us at USPI on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. With me today is Adam Mahdavi, a teacher at the South Carolina Preparatory Academy. Adam, you were the source of the now widely publicized video that helped expose CRT. So this was the CRT linked curriculum in the Lexington School District. Let's watch a portion of that video.
Sometimes classrooms are not spaces where LGBTQIA children feel safe. Sometimes classrooms are not places where Muslim children feel safe. Sometimes classrooms are not spaces where children of color, particularly Latinx or Black children or Native American children, feel safe. I just want to change it to safe spaces.
Okay, so that's a term I hear a lot, and I've heard it most recently with the transgender ideology, about safe spaces and making them feel safe. And interestingly enough, I just did an interview about a Rhode Island case where a student was transitioned behind the back of the parents for 2 years and ended up attempting suicide. So the irony there, of course, is they think that they're keeping them safe by, quote unquote, affirming their identity, when the fact of the matter is they're so confused that they've created this mental health issue that the child may never have had originally, or exasperates it. So tell us again. So you told us who that was in the video, and you've talked a little bit about it. What do you want to add to that?
Well, I just want to add that I didn't do the recording out of anger. I did it out of conscience. I did it out of wanting clarity, wanting transparency. It had nothing to do with me wanting revenge, because at the time of the recording, it was on July 12th that I made the recording. And for that recording, I was already employed by the South Carolina Preparatory Academy. And so there was really no anger, there was no resentment. It was just an opportunity I believe the Lord gave me. The Lord left the Amalekites, or the Philistines, into my hand, sort of say. And so that's the reason why I did it. I did it for conscience sake, and everybody else's clarity and transparency, and everybody else's conscience. There was really no other motive other than just that. And to your point, we had at the University of South Carolina College of Education, we had a equity officer from Richland County come and speak to the class one day in our education department. And she said, her name is Helen Grant. She said, this is what she said, and I recorded this too, that if you do not allow your transgender students to transition, then you do not love students and you need to go find another job. Essentially, that's what she basically said. And, she's told everyone in that classroom that if you are not allowing students to partake and exercise in this fantasy made up reality, then you don't belong in the schools. You don't belong to be in the reality of teaching. And it's truly absurd. The public needed to hear this, and I just wanted people to know what was going on. Now, to the point in the video, this is where the critical race theory idea intermingles with critical theory. So Foucault believed that power protects knowledge, and that power from the teacher can create an atmosphere where the knowledge that is created by the students is protected by the critical theory teacher. And where that intersects with critical race theory and culturally relevant pedagogy is where the critical race theorists will allow students of color, in particular, and students that are maybe thinking that they are trans, students that may be of any other minority status or a status of their sexuality or um, their um, their gender or whatnot have you. Um, those students can name their own reality in classrooms, and they can oppose and challenge and critique and be cynical against the American status quo and the American social order, meaning like color blindness. They can demonize color blindness, saying that if you do not see a person's color, then you are not acknowledging the most salient or the most important aspect of the person. And or they could say that you are uh, you are protecting meritocracy, where meritocracy doesn't allow any. Just because we have meritocracy doesn't mean that those that merit achievement and merit success always get the success that they deserve. And so, because meritocracy falls short, that we should just get rid of it. Or, they attack ideas like capitalism, saying how because um, it has its roots in slavery, then it needs to be abolished. They can attack the Constitution of the United States. They usually don't attack the Declaration of Independence, but they usually attack the God of the Declaration of Independence. That is for sure. Sometimes they will attack Thomas Jefferson. Sometimes they'll attack George Washington. They'll definitely attack um, uh, the Constitution for the Three-Fifths Clause, but yet say nothing of the fact that there was a sunset clause on the international slave trade, and many of them are not educated on what the Three-Fifths Clause actually did, and the fact that it really limited Southern pro-slavery lawmakers' power to really multiply in Congress, and that was really the point of it all. Um, and so children are not taught. They're taught that they can teach each other. They're taught that they can bring their culture from TikTok, from Instagram, from social media, and they can bring that culture into the classroom, and that's what they get to teach each other. Uh, and that's what we have going on most of the time right now. Are they teaching kids how to read and um, how to read books? Well, here's the interesting about that. Here's where critical race theory comes into play again. The books and the texts that are selected are in they are the genre of liberation. They are the genre of social empowerment, of empowering the oppressor. Because what culturally relevant pedagogy does is it gets students to think that America's meritocracy, colorblindness, uh, neutral law arrangement, or the doctrine that law is practiced from an objective, neutral standpoint, and also attacking capitalism. All those things are mechanisms of oppression, and they should be critiqued, challenged, and they should be reformed through policy, in which students are encouraged to advocate against any kind of policy that upholds and supports meritocracy, color blindness, legal neutrality, or capitalism, something of that sort. And all the texts that are given in those classrooms make capitalism, meritocracy, colorblindness, and the like seem oppressive. And what is happening is, because the students are made to think that they are conditioned, socially engineered to think that they are being oppressed by these outside factors of America, the status quo and the American social order, that they got to overturn it, that they got to make reform. They got to be a part of the change. And that's what you saw. That's what we all saw happening for 5 months in 2020, the summer of love, supposedly. Um, that's what happened. And it was right after the Project 1619 came out, 8 months earlier or 9 months earlier. That's when How to Be Anti-Racist came out. White Fragility had already been out for a couple years. And the educators, the academics, um, taught those books, all of those intellectual books, all of those books that say America is an oppressive mechanism against people of color and against minorities. Those principles are an attack on democracy, and they need to be overturned. Well, that was all coming from Project 1619. Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo at the time, and Ta-Nehisi Coates' book Between the World and Me. Um, and that's what we were seeing. And it was happening in a lot of our schools with curriculum guides for Project 1619, with tests, textbooks, teachers' guides, student workbooks all over the country had these Project 1619 material already available to them. And it just so happened to be before 8 months of George Floyd's unfortunate death. Not saying that George Floyd's death was planned, but the planning of the Project 1619 was intended to culminate and fomate revolution for sure,
Amen. And
revolutionary activity.
right, and I think we see it continuing today. It's one episode after another because children have been trained, as you have said, they've been trained to be what I call social justice warriors, and so we shouldn't be surprised when we see them rioting in the streets, and it's at any cost. It's social justice at any cost is what they've been taught.
And this just on that point, we're talking about the lawsuit. The result of that lawsuit in 2023 was that Lexington had to get rid of EL education for a couple years. And then in 2024, just last year, Charleston, the Charleston School District had to remove EL education as well. So that did two things, right? That validated that there was a reason for concern, but it also tells us that there's a lot more work still to do. There's a lot of change that needs to be done. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. These two settlements are not um, they're 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 not a total victory. They are a confirmation that we were right, and it's not a conclusion. So there needs to be more work done. Also, Ibram Kendi, the NAACP, and a few legislators and a teacher from Lexington District 5 is actually suing Ellen Weaver to support critical race theory being taught in our K through 12 schools. And they have filed a federal injunction against Ellen Weaver and Lexington School District 3. So the fight is not over. They are digging in their heels. I very much appreciate what Trump is doing with these DEI executive orders, and I really appreciate what Christopher Rufo is doing at New College in Florida. But we still have a huge problem. It has not gone away. And I would even say the preconditioning that got America in the situation to be situated in the 2020 Summer of Love, the Black Lives Matter riots, that kind of history is still being taught, and it's being taught at a very, very large capacity. And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I'm glad we won the lawsuit. I'm glad there was a win, but it's just a temporary satisfaction because there's more work that needs to be done.
Well, I agree with you 100% on that, Adam. And I know, and it's not just in South Carolina, of course, but I'm so glad you've come on the show to talk about what's real and alive and happening in South Carolina, because I can tell you that people all around me, especially in my hometown, think I'm a conspiracy theorist, and there's no way that's happening in our classrooms. And of course, like I told you, I filed the lawsuit. And I forgot to mention that the reason I had to file the lawsuit was when I FOIA'd the information that they told me I could have, they said that I couldn't have it because it was proprietary, because the person who created the PowerPoint slides owned that property and they couldn't give it to me without her consent. So I lost that lawsuit. Glad that you won yours. And there is much more work to be done. And I need to take another short break. But when I come back, I'd like to ask you 2 questions I ask all my guests before closing the show. So don't go away. I'll be back with my interview with Adam Mahdavi right after this. Government schools do not like boys. Boys are just too active, so they need to be medicated. Boys have budding, quote-unquote, toxic masculinity, so they must be belittled with narratives of being oppressors. Simply put, boys are being punished just for being boys. Young American men are in crisis. Research shows that poor school experiences are strongly linked to major challenges later in life, including physical and mental health issues, addiction, and crime. Today, fewer young adult men are settled into permanent jobs, and fewer men are married with children. With men in positions of authority dressed as women, role models have become confusing at best. U.S. Parents Involved in Education is sounding the alarm. Save our boys. Save our country. Tune in next week for more insights from U.S. Parents Involved in Education and connect with us at USPI on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. With me today has been Adam Mahdavi, a South Carolina teacher who blew the whistle on teaching critical race theory in the school district where he used to teach. Adam, we close our show with 2 important questions. What concerns you most about what's happening in education today, and what gives you hope?
You're not alone. You're not a conspiracy theorist. You're not crazy. But stay fearless. Stay bold. Be practical. Be level-headed, be controlled, and be wise. Be, as like Jesus said, be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, and pick your battles wisely. Again, you don't have to win all the arguments. You just got to learn the arguments that win. And my biggest source of hope is that we have technology, we have artificial intelligence, and it's a double-edged sword because so do they. The University of South Carolina is giving their students access to AI at a large capacity. But those that are like-minded like us, they love America, they love the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and they love the freedoms that they have. And people like you who are made to feel otherwise and made to feel like you're a problem, but you're really a problem solver. You were just talking about your lawsuit and how a lot of people have not a lot, not everybody, but you definitely feel the stigma, and in some areas, you sense that pressure as well because you have been fearless, you have been courageous, and you have been bold. And I would just say to you that you are needed. Students need you. Parents need you, not just here in South Carolina, but all over our country. God has blessed this country, so you keep fighting for him. Stay fearless, don't be afraid, and stay strong. You're not crazy, and you are not alone.
Thank you for your words of encouragement. I'm sure that others who are in the battlefield with us will appreciate that as well. And you talked about boldness, and I noted earlier what you said, and I may adopt that phrase because I think God has given me, he says throughout his word that we need to be bold and courageous, and it just always jumps out at me when I read that. But you said you were bold on steroids earlier, so that's the phrase I may adopt. I love that. So, Adam, this has been an amazing time in this conversation, and you have such a depth of knowledge of these issues, and I have no doubt that you're going to stay in the fight and you're going to continue to learn and research. And for that reason, I'd love to have you back on, a few months down the road, and we'll have another conversation because I really felt like we could have discussed so much more today. So thank you again for coming on the show. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. If this episode encouraged or challenged you, please consider sharing it with a friend, and be sure to visit uspie.org to learn more and to join the movement. See you next time.
U.S. Parents Involved in Education is a nonprofit coalition dedicated to restoring local control of education and parental authority. By empowering parents to reclaim responsibility for their children's learning and encouraging states to move away from federal influence, U.S. PI seeks to create a culture where parents are the primary decision-makers in education and schools support families without the burden of federal mandates. If you want to start a state or regional U.S. PI chapter in your area, please visit uspi.org and complete the brief questionnaire in the chapters section.